She walked into the café to meet a blind date and forget her divorce. The man holding red roses wasn't just handsome, he was the vampire king who'd been searching 3 centuries for his fated mate. But recognizing her meant she'd already triggered an ancient blood bond, and now his enemies would hunt her before dawn. Elena clutched the roses against her chest as the Mercedes tore through rain-slicked streets, their petals impossibly warm through her damp coat. The umbrella lay forgotten somewhere in that alley, just one more piece of her normal life abandoned in the span of heartbeats. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to catalog details like she did when approaching a new building site, because details were rational, and rational meant she wasn't losing her mind. The man beside her breathed steadily, though she'd watched him move with speed that shouldn't exist, fight with strength that defied physics. Lucas Chen, venture capitalist. What a perfect lie. What a carefully constructed fiction Jenna had been fed. The driver called him something else in that alley. Sir, my lord. Words that belonged in historical dramas, not in a car speeding through downtown Seattle on a Thursday night. Now please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from and what time is it. It is always fascinating to see where these stories get all around the world. Thank you. Elena's architectural training insisted on logic, on foundation and structure and measurable reality. But the warmth spreading from where Lucienne's hand had touched hers argued against everything she thought she knew about the world. The roses pulsed faintly in rhythm with her heartbeat, and that should be impossible. But then again, silver-haired women didn't pin people to walls with supernatural strength either. She wanted to demand answers, to scream, to laugh at the absurdity, but her throat felt tight and her thoughts scattered like dropped blueprints. The city lights blurred past in streaks of gold and red. Marcus took a sharp turn that should have sent them sliding, but the car held steady as though physics bent around his will. She caught his eyes again in the rearview mirror, dark and assessing, weighing whether she'd break or hold together. Elena had held together through Michael's confession about his affair, through the division of their shared apartment, through signing papers that dissolved 5 years of marriage. She could hold together through this too, whatever this was. Lucian finally spoke, his voice carrying that same low cadence that had relaxed her in the cafe a lifetime ago. We're taking you somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach you easily. She found her voice, surprised by how steady it sounded. Who are they? What are they? What are you? The questions tumbled out rapid fire, punctuated by the rhythm of windshield wipers fighting rain. Lucian turned to face her fully, and in the passing streetlights, his features looked carved from marble, ageless and beautiful, in a way that suddenly seemed less attractive and more alarming. I'm what your legends call a vampire, though the reality is more complicated than the stories. I've lived for 347 years. I rule one of the 7 vampire courts that maintain the balance between our world and yours. And you, Elena Marsh, are the person I've been searching for across 3 centuries. The bond that formed the moment we saw each other, that's real. Ancient. Unbreakable once it completes. Elena laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. This is insane. You're insane. I'm probably concussing in that alley right now, hallucinating all of this. Marcus spoke without taking his eyes from the road. You're not concussed, Miss Marsh. I apologize for the abrupt introduction to our world, but the Covenant doesn't respect the niceties of gradual revelation. They felt the bond form, and they'll do everything in their power to kill you before it solidifies. She pressed her free hand against the window, the glass cold and real against her palm. The roses in her other hand pulsed warmer. Vampires aren't real. Blood-drinking monsters aren't real. The man I was supposed to have coffee with can't be some immortal king. I design affordable housing. I have a cat named Mr. Darcy. I just finalized my divorce 3 months ago. This doesn't happen to people like me. Lucian's expression softened, and for a moment she saw past the inhuman beauty to something achingly lonely. It happened to you because bloodlines recognize each other across time. Your ancestor was consort to the first vampire king, the progenitor of my line. That connection passes down through generations, dormant, waiting. Most humans who carry it live and die without ever triggering the bond. But when one of my bloodline and one of yours meet, when the circumstances align just right, the magic wakes up. It chose you. I didn't choose you, Elena. I would never force this on anyone. The bond chose us both. The car pulled up to massive iron gates set in a stone wall that looked older than the surrounding neighborhood. Marcus pressed something on the dashboard, and the gates swung open silently. Beyond them stretched a driveway lined with old-growth trees, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the city lights. The estate at the end of the drive rose like something from another century, all stone and Gothic windows and towers that scraped the low clouds. Elena stared as they approached. "This is in Seattle. I've lived here for 8 years. How did I never know this existed?" "There are ways of keeping places hidden," Lucian said quietly. "Old magic, older than countries. Humans see what they expect to see, unless they're looking for something specific." The car stopped at the front entrance where 2 more figures waited under the portico, backlit by warm light spilling from inside. One was a woman who appeared to be in her 60s, silver-haired but not the vampire from the alley, dressed in flowing fabrics that suggested ritual more than fashion. The other was younger, early 20s maybe, handsome in a boyish way that contrasted sharply with Lucien's austere beauty. Marcus opened Elena's door and she stepped out on legs that felt uncertain. The rain had stopped, but mist hung in the air, catching the light like suspended diamonds. The older woman approached first, her gaze sharp and evaluating. "So this is the one. The bond marked. She has her ancestors' eyes." Lucien moved to Elena's side, not touching, but close enough that she felt the heat radiating from him. "Elena, this is Isabel. She's been my advisor for 400 years. And this is Thomas, newest member of my inner court." The young man offered a tentative smile. "Welcome, Miss Marsh. I know this must be overwhelming." "Understatement," Elena managed. Isabel circled her once, humming under her breath. "The bond is strong, progressing faster than usual. She'll need training if she's to survive what comes next." The casual mention of survival sent ice down Elena's spine. What exactly comes next? Can someone please explain what's happening in terms that don't sound like a fantasy novel? Lucian gestured toward the entrance. "Come inside. We'll explain everything. You have questions and you deserve answers. But first we need to secure the wards. The Covenant will be searching, and I won't risk them finding you before you understand what you're choosing." "Choosing?" Elena repeated. "So I have a choice in this." Lucien met her eyes and she saw honesty there, stark and uncompromising. "Always. The bond has begun, but it takes 72 hours to complete. During that time you can walk away. It will hurt us both, but we'll survive. You can return to your life, return to being human. Or you can stay, learn what this means, decide if you want to complete the bond. If you choose to complete it, you become immortal. You become part of my world forever. And you become a target for every vampire who wants to see my line fall." The weight of it hit her like a physical blow. 3 days ago, her biggest worry had been whether the permit office would approve her revised plans for the community center project. Now she stood outside a hidden vampire estate, being told she could choose between her mortality and forever. The roses in her hand flared brighter, and she looked down at them, really looked. The petals weren't just warm, they glowed faintly from within, responding to something in her blood, her presence. Magic. Real magic. Which meant everything else was real too. The vampires, the danger, the impossible man watching her with 3 centuries of patience in his eyes. Elena had rebuilt herself after the divorce by making careful, measured decisions. By weighing pros and cons, by choosing stability over risk. This was the opposite of careful. This was diving off a cliff into darkness, trusting that something would catch her before she hit bottom. But something in her chest, something that had felt hollow since Michael left, maybe even before he left, suddenly felt full. The bond, Lucian called it. It hummed between them like a plucked string, resonating in frequencies she'd never heard before. She'd spent her marriage making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient. Michael had loved her best when she needed him least, when she didn't ask too many questions, or want too much space, or demand too much attention. And she'd obliged, folding herself into shapes that fit his comfort until she forgot her original form. This man, this vampire king, looked at her like she was exactly the right size. Like 300 years of searching had led to her, unremarkable Elena Marsh, with her practical shoes, and her sensible career, and her recently failed marriage. He'd said the bond chose them both. Not him choosing her, not her earning worthiness, just recognition, two pieces that fit together across impossible time. She took a breath that tasted like rain and stone and something older, something that made her architect's mind think of foundation, of structures built to last centuries. Okay, show me, explain everything. I'll decide after I know what I'm deciding. Lucian's shoulders relaxed fractionally, relief flickering across his features. Thank you for giving me the chance. He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. The connection sparked again, that lightning in veins sensation, but this time she didn't pull away. This time she let herself feel it, explore the edges of whatever magic bound them. It felt like coming home to a house she'd never lived in but somehow knew every room of. They walked together through the massive doors into an entrance hall that belonged in a European castle. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, tapestries that looked genuinely medieval, hanging on walls lit by chandeliers that somehow used candles instead of electricity. But beneath the grandeur, she noticed modern security, cameras hidden in cornices, sensors embedded in door frames, old-world aesthetics protecting new-world technology. Or maybe the reverse. Marcus disappeared down a side corridor while Thomas bounded ahead to open doors. Isabel walked beside Elena, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but felt more like being assessed for potential rather than judged for flaws. You're handling this better than most, the older woman observed. Most humans, we've had to reveal ourselves to either faint or run screaming. Elena managed a weak laugh. I'm an architect. I've had contractors tell me buildings I designed can't be built, then watch them get constructed exactly as planned. I've learned that impossible just means we haven't found the right approach yet. Besides, I think I'm in shock. The screaming might come later. Fair enough, Isabel said with something that might have been approval. Shock is useful sometimes. Keeps you moving when panic would freeze you. They entered a library that made Elena's breath catch. 3 stories of books, spiral staircases connecting levels, windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing the mist-shrouded grounds. A fire burned in a hearth large enough to stand in, crackling with warmth that pushed back the November chill. Lucienne guided her to a chair near the fire, then took the seat across from her, close enough to talk comfortably, but far enough to not crowd. Thomas perched on a nearby desk while Isabel settled into a high-backed chair that looked like a throne. Marcus returned carrying a tray with coffee, real coffee that smelled like normalcy and sanity. Elena accepted a cup gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warmth. The roses lay across her lap, still glowing faintly. All right, she said, forcing her voice steady. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything. Lucien began with the oldest memory he could safely share, a winter night in 1678 when everything human in him died and something else took its place. Elena sat across from him in the library, their hands clasped, and felt the memory wash over her like cold water, not watching it but experiencing it, tasting the snow on his tongue, feeling the fever that racked his body as the transformation burned through him. A plague doctor had turned him, one of the old ones who still believed in preserving bloodlines rather than spreading them carelessly. The pain had been unbearable but brief. What came after? The hunger that lasted decades before he learned control. She felt his first kill, a bandit who'd attacked a merchant caravan. The hot rush of blood, the ecstasy and revulsion mixed together. Lucian had vomited afterward, tried to starve himself, prayed to a god who no longer answered. But the hunger always won. He showed her how he'd learned restraint over years, then decades. How he'd found others like him who wanted to build something better than the endless predation that defined vampire existence. They'd formed a court, established territories, created the first contracts with human populations. Protection in exchange for willing donors. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than the alternative. Elena watched through his eyes as he became king in 1701, not through inheritance, but through necessity. His predecessor had been assassinated by the Covenant, a faction that believed vampires should rule humans openly, should take what they wanted without pretense of partnership. They'd nearly succeeded in seizing control until Lucian challenged their leader to single combat under the old laws. She felt the weight of the crown when it settled on his head, metaphorical but no less heavy. The responsibility for thousands of vampires and the humans under their protection. Every death that followed, justified or not, he carried. She saw glimpses of wars fought in shadows, political maneuverings that spanned continents, alliances forged and broken. The memory shifted, and she was in London during the Blitz, watching Lucien pull survivors from bombed buildings alongside human rescue workers. He'd lost 12 vampires that night to Covenant assassins who used the chaos as cover. She felt his grief, sharp and immediate even 70 years later. Then Paris in the 1800s, negotiating with human governments who were just beginning to suspect the supernatural world existed. Lucian had convinced them that cooperation served everyone better than exposure and war. The treaty they'd signed still governed vampire-human relations in most of Europe. Through it all ran the loneliness, constant as a heartbeat. 300 years of watching everyone around him find mates, build families, create connections that would last centuries while he searched for someone who didn't exist, or who existed but hadn't been born yet. The prophecies were vague, promising a fated mate from the first bloodline who would either save his kingdom or destroy it. Lucian had chased rumors across continents. A woman in Prague who carried the mark but died before the bond could form. A man in Cairo who had the bloodline but no compatibility. Decades of hope and disappointment until he'd stopped believing the prophecies meant anything real. Until 3 months ago when his court witch, Isabel, had cast the bones and told him the fated one walked in this city, in this time. He'd been searching Seattle methodically, attending every social function, every gallery opening, every place humans gathered. And then Jenna had mentioned her sister to someone at an art exhibit, mentioned she was recently divorced and needed to get out more, and something in Lucian had known, not certainty, but possibility, enough to arrange the meeting. Elena pulled back from the memory stream, breathing hard. Her coffee had gone cold on the side table. Dawn light filtered through the library windows, pale and hesitant. She looked at Lucian and saw him differently now. Not just the impossibly handsome stranger from the café, but the accumulation of centuries, the weight of choices made under impossible circumstances. "You've killed people," she said. Not a question. Statement of fact drawn from the memories he'd shared. Lucian didn't flinch from it. Yes. In war, in self-defense, in protection of those under my care. And once, early on, when I lost control of the hunger. That one haunts me most. She could feel the truth of it through the bond, the genuine remorse. He'd spent 2 centuries trying to atone for that single death, had created laws and systems to prevent other young vampires from making the same mistake. But he also killed the Covenant assassins in the alley without hesitation, she pointed out. They would have killed you, Lucienne said simply. And then they would have killed every human in that café to cover their tracks. I don't regret stopping them. I regret that it was necessary. The distinction mattered, Elena realized. Not that he'd killed, but that he understood the weight of it, carried it consciously rather than dismissing it. Michael had cheated on her and justified it, made excuses, blamed her for not being enough. Lucian had done objectively worse things and took full responsibility for each one. The honesty was startling. She stood, needing to move, to process. The bond hummed between them, stronger now after the memory sharing. She could feel his exhaustion, 3 centuries of it, bone deep and relentless. Could feel his hope too, fragile as spun glass, that she might choose to stay. Outside the window, the estate grounds stretched into morning mist. Gardens that had been tended for generations, stone paths worn smooth by countless feet. It looked peaceful, but she knew now what lurked beyond the walls. The Covenant, other vampire factions. Humans who would panic if they knew the supernatural world existed alongside theirs. And she stood at the center of it, an ordinary architect who'd just wanted to forget her failed marriage for one evening. Her phone buzzed insistently on the table where she'd left it. 23 messages from Jenna, each more frantic than the last. The news was reporting a gas explosion at Rosewood Café, minor injuries, investigation ongoing. Jenna had called the police, filed a missing person report that they'd dismissed because Elena was an adult who'd only been out of contact for 12 hours. But her sister knew something was wrong. Jenna had always known when Elena was lying, even when they were children. "I have to call her," Elena said. "She'll come here if I don't. She might come anyway." Marcus appeared in the doorway as though summoned. Probably was through whatever communication network the vampires maintained. "Let her come. We can protect one human for a short visit, better than having her draw attention trying to find you." Lucian looked uncertain. "It's a risk. If the Covenant is watching her, follows her here." "Then we deal with it," Marcus said calmly. "We've dealt with worse. And Miss Marsh needs something familiar right now. Something human." He was right, and they all knew it. Elena was clinging to humanity by her fingernails, trying to stay grounded while everything she thought she knew about reality shifted beneath her feet. Jenna would be an anchor, a reminder that the normal world still existed, even if Elena could never fully return to it. She picked up her phone with shaking hands and called her sister. Jenna answered on the first ring. "Elena, where are you?" "What happened? I've been terrified." Elena closed her eyes, hating the lie but knowing she couldn't tell the truth. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "I'm fine, Jen. I'm sorry I scared you. I left the cafe before the explosion. I'm staying with Lucas for a few days. We hit it off and I needed to get away from everything for a while." The silence on the other end was weighted with skepticism. "You sound strange. Are you sure you're okay?" Define okay, Elena thought. "I'm learning vampires are real, and I might become immortal or die in 3 days." Out loud she said, "I know it's sudden. I know it seems crazy, but I need you to trust me. Can you come visit? Meet Lucas properly. I need to see you." More silence, then, "Text me the address. I'm coming now." "Hang on," Elena said quickly. "It's outside the city. You'll need directions. And Jen, don't tell anyone where you're going. Not yet. This needs to stay quiet for now." "Now I know something's wrong," Jenna said flatly. "You never ask me to keep secrets." Elena glanced at Lucien, saw his expression carefully neutral, felt through the bond that he would support whatever choice she made. Her choice. Always her choice, even when the options were impossible. "Please," she said to her sister, "just trust me for a few more days. Then I'll explain everything, I promise." "Fine," Jenna said. "But if this Lucas has hurt you, if this is some kind of controlling relationship thing, I'm calling the police and I don't care how rich or charming he is." "He hasn't hurt me," Elena said, surprised to realize it was completely true. Everything else was chaos, But Lucian had been nothing but honest with her, even when the truth made him vulnerable. I'll text you the address. Be careful driving, the roads are still wet. She hung up before Jenna could ask more questions. Marcus was already coordinating with Thomas, setting up additional perimeter security, arranging for escorts to make sure Jenna wasn't followed. Isabel emerged from wherever she'd been, carrying supplies for what she called basic warding, enough to protect a human temporarily from vampire influence. We'll need to tell her something, Isabel said. Humans aren't stupid. She'll see this place and know her sister isn't just staying with a normal boyfriend. How much do we tell her? Elena asked. Lucien moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she felt steadied by his presence. As much as she needs to know to stay safe, as little as possible to keep her from being a target herself. Knowledge is dangerous in our world. The Covenant doesn't leave loose ends. So we lie to her too, Elena said bitterly. Another person I have to deceive. We protect her, Lucien corrected gently. There's a difference. Lies that serve selfishness versus truth withheld for safety. You're learning to think like one of us already. Elena wasn't sure that was a compliment. The bond pulsed, sharing sensation now as Isabel had warned. She could feel Lucien's steady heartbeat, slower than human, could sense his awareness of her distress, and his desire to comfort her warring with his respect for her need for space. The connection was intimate in ways that made her want to pull away and lean closer simultaneously. Stage 2, she said. The emotional bleed-through. It started. Yes, Lucien confirmed. It will intensify over the next 24 hours. By tomorrow night, you'll know my thoughts almost as clearly as your own, unless we actively shield from each other. And I'll know yours. The vulnerability of that should have terrified her, but instead it felt almost safe. No more hiding, no more pretending. Michael had never really known her because she'd never let him see the parts she thought he wouldn't like. Lucien would see everything whether she wanted him to or not. The bond didn't allow for performance. She'd have to be genuinely herself or go mad from the dissonance. Maybe that was why the magic chose carefully, only bonding people who could survive that level of exposure. Thomas returned with the news that Jenna was 40 minutes out, driving fast despite the wet roads. Marcus had teams positioned along her route, invisible but vigilant. So far, no sign of Covenant surveillance, but they'd know for certain once she reached the estate boundaries. The wards would alert them to any hostile presence. Elena used the time to shower and change into clothes Isabel had somehow procured in her exact size, soft fabrics that felt expensive against her skin. She caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror and stopped. She looked different, not dramatically but noticeably. Her skin seemed clearer, her eyes brighter. The bond was already changing her, preparing her body for the transformation that would come if she accepted stage 3, or killing her slowly if she rejected it. 50-50 odds on which. She thought about Constantine's offer, the release of bond that would let her walk away cleanly, return to her apartment, her job, her cat, her normal life. Pretend this had never happened. Except she couldn't pretend anymore. The bond had shown her things that couldn't be unseen, made her feel things she couldn't unfeel. Even if she broke it, she'd spend the rest of her human life knowing what she'd walked away from. Immortality, power, purpose. And Lucien. She'd spend her life knowing she'd condemned him to slow death, condemned his people to Covenant rule, condemned herself to always wondering what if. Unless that was the bond talking, influencing her thoughts toward acceptance. She pressed her hands against the marble sink, trying to find clarity. What did Elena Marsh actually want, stripped of magic and manipulation and impossible circumstances? She wanted to matter. She wanted to build things that lasted. She wanted partnership that didn't require her to be smaller than she was. She wanted to stop feeling like she was waiting for her real life to start. The bond offered all of that, and it offered it wrapped in danger and immortality and a vampire king who looked at her like she was the answer to 3 centuries of searching. Was that enough? She didn't know yet, Jenna's arrival was announced by the wards flaring bright enough to see from inside the estate, a shimmer of gold and silver that made the air taste like ozone. Elena met her at the entrance, Thomas hovering nearby trying to look casual and failing. Her sister emerged from her compact sedan, looking rumpled and worried, scanning the estate with wide eyes. "This is where Lucas lives," Jenna said slowly. "This is his family's property," Elena confirmed, technically true if you counted a vampire court as family. It's been in their line for generations. Jenna hugged her hard, checking her over for injuries. "You're sure you're okay? You look different. Better different, but different." "I'm figuring some things out," Elena said carefully. "About what I want, what I'm willing to risk for it. Can we talk?" They walked the gardens while Thomas shadowed at a discreet distance. Elena tried to find words that weren't lies, but also weren't the full truth. Lucas was honest about some complicated family circumstances. "There are people who don't want us together, who might try to hurt me to get to him. I'm safe here, but I can't leave yet, not until things are resolved." "That's insane," Jenna said immediately. "If he's putting you in danger, you leave. Now. Come home with me. We'll deal with whoever these people are through proper channels." Elena laughed without humor. "There are no proper channels for this. And I don't want to leave. That's what scares me most, Jen. I barely know him, but I feel like I've known him forever. Like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, even though it's completely crazy." Jenna stopped walking, turned to face her directly. "This sounds like every true crime podcast I've ever listened to. Charming man, isolated location, claims of external threats. Elena, I love you, but you're being stupid." "Maybe," Elena admitted. "Or maybe I'm finally being smart enough to take a risk on something real instead of settling for safe and hollow." Her sister's expression shifted from worry to understanding. "This is about Michael, about the divorce. This is you rebelling against playing it safe." "Partially," Elena said. "But it's also about me finally admitting what I actually want. And what I want is complicated and maybe dangerous, but it's mine. I'm choosing it." Jenna looked past her to where Lucian had emerged onto the terrace, watching them with that patient stillness that was becoming familiar. "He's in love with you," Jenna observed. "You can see it from here, the way he looks at you like you're the only person in the world. It's intense." Elena felt the truth of it through the bond. Lucian's emotions laid bare. Not just love, but devotion, need, hope, fear all tangled together. "Yes," she said quietly. "And I think I'm falling for him too. Just give me a few more days to be sure." Jenna didn't look happy, but she nodded. "Few more days. Then I'm dragging you home if necessary, vampire king or not." Elena froze. "What did you say?" "Vampire," Jenna repeated. "That's what this place feels like. Old and predatory and not quite human. I'm not an idiot, Elena. I know something supernatural is happening here. I just don't know what yet." Thomas swore quietly behind them. Marcus appeared from nowhere, suddenly tense. "Miss Marsh, how much do you actually know?" Jenna smiled without warmth. "Enough to recognize when my sister is neck-deep in the kind of trouble that doesn't make logical sense. Now, someone want to tell me the truth before I start making phone calls." The revelation hung in the garden air like frost, sharp and crystalline. Jenna stood with her arms crossed, waiting for someone to stop treating her like she was fragile or stupid. And Elena realized her sister had always been perceptive in ways that made lying to her impossible. Thomas looked to Marcus, who looked to Lucian, who finally nodded once, a decision made. They moved back inside to the library where the fire still burned, and the ancient books watched from their shelves like silent witnesses. Isabel joined them, settling into her chair with the air of someone who'd explained impossible things to skeptical humans more times than she could count. Jenna sat on the edge of a leather sofa, spine straight, jaw set. Elena recognized that posture from childhood, from every time Jenna had demanded truth from their parents about money problems or health scares, or why Grandma couldn't remember their names anymore. Her sister didn't accept comfortable lies when hard truths were available. Lucien stood near the fireplace, backlit by flames that cast his shadow long across the floor. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. Everything you've suspected is true. I am what your legends call a vampire, though the reality is more complex than folklore suggests. This estate houses my court, those who have chosen to follow the laws I've established rather than the old ways of unchecked predation. Your sister carries a bloodline that marks her as my fated mate, a bond that began forming the moment we met and will complete in approximately 36 hours if she chooses to accept it. If she accepts, she becomes immortal and bound to me across eternity. If she refuses, we both die, and the faction that opposes my rule takes control of territories that span 3 continents and govern the interactions between vampire and human populations. Jenna absorbed this with visible effort, her face cycling through disbelief and acceptance and back again. She looked at Elena. You believe this, all of it. Elena felt the bond humming between her and Lucian, felt his tension and his respect for her sister's courage in demanding truth. I've seen things, Jen, things that can't be explained away, and I can feel him in my head now, his emotions, his memories. It's real. All of it. Prove it, Jenna said flatly. Show me something that can't be faked with special effects or drugs or mass hypnosis. Isabel stood and moved to Jenna with surprising speed for someone who appeared elderly. She held out her hand, palm up. Give me something personal, something you've owned for years. Jenna hesitated, then pulled off a silver bracelet their grandmother had given her decades ago, before the dementia took hold. Isabel held it gently, closed her eyes, and began speaking in a voice that wasn't quite her own. Sarah Marsh, born 1924, died 2019. Loved her granddaughters more than breath itself, taught them to bake bread on Sunday mornings, feared forgetting them more than she feared death, wanted them to know she recognized them even when the words wouldn't come. She kept a journal under her mattress where she wrote their names every night to prove to herself she still knew them. The bracelet was meant to remind you both that love persists even when memory fails. Jenna's face went white. She took the bracelet back with shaking hands. No one knew about that journal. We found it after she died. Elena and I never told anyone. Isabel's eyes opened, her own voice returning. Magic is older than your skepticism, child, and some truths are too important to hide behind comfortable denial. Your sister stands at a crossroads that will determine the fate of thousands. She deserves support, not doubt. But Jenna wasn't done. She turned to Lucien with fire in her eyes. You said you've established laws, that you're different from other vampires. What does that actually mean? Do you kill people? Do you drink blood? What exactly is my sister signing up for if she accepts this bond? Lucian met her challenge without flinching. Yes, I drink blood. All vampires do. It's how we survive. But my court operates on consent. We have contracts with willing human donors who understand what they're providing and are compensated fairly. No one is forced. No one is killed for sustenance. We also maintain hospitals, research facilities seeking synthetic alternatives, advocacy groups working to bridge the divide between our species. As for killing, yes, I have taken lives. In defense of my people, in wars against factions that would slaughter humans and vampires alike, in protection of the fragile peace we've built over centuries. I don't apologize for those deaths, but I carry the weight of each one. And he showed you this, Jenna pressed. All of it, the blood and the violence and the moral complexity. He didn't lie to make himself seem better than he is. Elena answered before Lucienne could. He showed me everything, the worst of it. He could have hidden it, could have seduced me with the romance of immortality and power. Instead, he gave me truth and told me the choice was mine. That's why I'm considering this, Jen, because he's honest even when honesty hurts his cause. Jenna stood and paced the library, thinking hard. Thomas offered her coffee, which she accepted automatically, drinking it while she processed. Finally, she turned back to Elena. If you do this, if you accept the bond, what happens to you? Specifically, no poetry about eternal love, just facts. Isabel provided the clinical answer Elena appreciated her sister demanding. She will undergo a transformation over approximately 6 hours. Her human body will die in the technical sense, heart stopping, breathing ceasing. Then vampire magic will reanimate her, restructure her cells, grant her immortality and powers that match her mate's strength. She'll need to feed on blood regularly. She'll be sensitive to sunlight, though not fatally so, with proper protection. She'll heal from injuries that would kill a human. And she'll be bound to Lucian permanently, able to sense his location, his emotions, his thoughts, unless they actively shield from each other. The bond cannot be broken without killing them both. So my sister dies, Jenna said quietly, and something else wearing her face comes back. That's what you're telling me. No, Lucienne said firmly. She remains herself, her personality, her memories, her essential nature. The bond transforms, it doesn't erase. I've known vampires who were turned against their will, and they remain fundamentally who they were as humans, just with extended lifetimes and different needs. Elena will still be Elena, still be your sister, still care about the things she cares about now. She'll just have eternity to pursue them. And enemies trying to kill her, Jenna added. Don't forget that part. Yes, Marcus confirmed from his position near the door. The Covenant will view her as a legitimate target, will protect her, but the danger is real and permanent. She'll need to learn combat, strategy, how to navigate vampire politics. Her life will never be simple again. Jenna looked at her sister for a long moment. You want this. Really want it. Not just caught up in the romance or the fear or the bond pushing you toward it. Elena searched herself honestly, trying to separate the bond's influence from her genuine desire. The bond amplified feelings, but Isabel had insisted it didn't create them from nothing. What did Elena actually want, stripped of magic and circumstance? I want to matter, she said slowly. I want to build things that last longer than a human lifetime. I want partnership with someone who sees all of me and doesn't ask me to be smaller. Michael needed me to be supportive and quiet and uncomplicated. Lucian has seen me terrified and angry and uncertain, and he still believes I'm strong enough for this. That means something to me, more than safety means to me. Then I can't stop you, Jenna said, voice rough. But I'm terrified for you, and I need you to promise me something. Anything, Elena said immediately. Promise me you'll stay connected to the human world, to me, to your work, to the parts of yourself that aren't about being a vampire queen or whatever you're going to become. Promise me Elena doesn't get lost in all of this. I promise, Elena said, meaning it. I'll still design buildings. I'll still visit you. I'll still be your sister, even if I'm also something else. Jenna hugged her hard, fierce, and protective. Okay, okay. But if this vampire king breaks your heart or puts you in unnecessary danger, I don't care how immortal he is. I will find a way to make him regret it. Lucian's lips quirked in something almost like a smile, noted and understood. Your sister is fortunate to have such fierce protection. After Marcus escorted Jenna home with promises of regular contact and protection if the Covenant retaliated against Elena's family, the estate settled into tense preparation. Elena felt the bond shifting, deepening, as midnight approached and passed. The deadline had come and gone. She hadn't signed Constantine's release. The choice was made even if the ritual remained incomplete. Isabel found Elena in the garden near dawn, watching the sky lighten from black to deep blue. The older woman sat beside her on the stone bench, quiet for a moment before speaking. You're afraid of the guilt, of inheriting the weight of his choices. Elena didn't deny it. How do you carry 300 years of necessary evils without losing yourself? You don't carry it alone, Isabel said simply. That's what the bond provides. Shared burden, shared purpose. Lucian has been alone for centuries, making impossible choices with no one to help bear the weight. You'll change that. You'll help him find better paths forward because you see possibilities he's too tired to imagine. That's what a true mate does. Not absolve past sins, but transform future options. And what if I make it worse? Elena asked quietly. What if I'm not strong enough, not wise enough, and my choices get people killed? Then you'll carry that weight together, Isabel said. And you'll learn from it, and try to do better next time. Immortality isn't about perfection, child. It's about having enough time to fail and grow and fail again until you finally get it right. Lucian has been failing alone for centuries. At least now he'll have company. The practical honesty of it settled something in Elena's chest. She wasn't signing up for moral purity or easy answers. She was signing up for messy, complicated eternity with someone who would face it honestly beside her, that she could do, that she wanted to do. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Marcus ran her through combat drills until her muscles screamed, pushing her harder now that the choice was made. You're already stronger than you were yesterday, he observed. The bond is preparing your body for transformation. By tomorrow you'll be fast enough to actually land a hit on me. Maybe. Elena managed a tired laugh. Encouraging. Thomas taught her the basics of vampire politics, the 7 courts and their territories, the ancient laws that govern challenges and succession, the delicate balance of power that kept their world from descending into chaos. It was more complex than human government, layered with centuries of precedent and blood feuds and alliances that shifted like sand. Your role as consort will be partially ceremonial, but also strategic, Thomas explained. You'll have a voice in court decisions, authority over certain territories, responsibility for mediating disputes. The covenant will test you constantly, looking for weakness. You'll need to be smart and ruthless when necessary. I'm an architect, Elena protested. I design community centers and affordable housing. I don't know how to be ruthless. You convinced a city council to approve low-income housing in a wealthy neighborhood despite massive opposition, Thomas countered. Lucian showed me the project files. You navigated politics and bureaucracy and NIMBY protests for 2 years until you won. That's the same skill set, just different stakes. Elena hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. She'd fought for her projects, learned to play political games when necessary, developed a spine of steel under her professional demeanor. Maybe she was more prepared for this than she thought. As afternoon faded to evening, Lucian found her in the library, studying maps of vampire territories. He sat beside her close enough that she felt the bond resonating between them like a plucked string. Tomorrow night, he said quietly. The ritual. Are you ready? No, Elena admitted. But I'm going anyway. He took her hand, and the electric connection flared. Through the bond she felt his love, his fear, his desperate hope that this would work, that they'd both survive what came next. I need you to understand something, Lucienne said. Once the bond completes, you'll know everything about me. Every thought, every memory, 3 centuries of existence laid bare. There will be things you'll wish you didn't know, darkness I can't hide from you. Are you certain you can live with that level of intimacy? Elena turned to face him fully. Michael and I were married for 5 years, and he never really knew me. I never let him because I was afraid he wouldn't like what he found. I'm tired of performing, of hiding parts of myself to make someone else comfortable. If the bond means we see each other completely, flaws and darkness and all, then at least it's honest. At least it's real. That's what I want, Lucian. Reality, not performance. Even if reality is difficult, especially if it's difficult. Something in his expression cracked, vulnerability showing through. I don't deserve you, but I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway. You deserve honesty and choice and partnership, Elena said firmly. That's what you've given me. Everything else we'll figure out together. They sat together as darkness fell fully outside, the bond wrapping around them like a blanket. Elena could feel Lucien's exhaustion, 300 years of it, and underneath that, his fragile hope that maybe, Finally, he'd found home. She could feel her own fear and excitement and determination tangled together. Tomorrow they would face the covenant, face the ritual, face the transformation that would change her forever. Tonight they had this moment of quiet before the storm. A knock on the library door interrupted them. Marcus entered looking grim. "We have a problem. Michael is at the gates again, and this time he brought reinforcements. Lawyers, police, someone claiming to be a psychiatrist. He's trying to have Elena declared mentally incompetent, removed from the estate by force. He's arguing you're holding her against her will." Lucian's expression went cold in a way that made Elena understand why people called him king. The covenant is behind this. They're using him to create legal complications, draw human attention to the estate. If police breach the wards, if this becomes a public incident, it jeopardizes everything. "Can we send them away?" Elena asked. "Explain I'm here voluntarily." Marcus shook his head. "Michael has convinced them you're brainwashed. They won't take your word for it. They want independent verification. And if we refuse access, they'll escalate. Get a warrant. Bring media attention. The covenant wants exactly that. Publicity that forces our hand." Elena stood, decision crystallizing. "Then I'll go out there. Talk to them face to face. Prove I'm here by choice. Let them see I'm fine." "Too dangerous," Lucian said immediately. "The moment you cross the wards without the bond complete, Covenant assassins will have a clear shot. We can protect the estate, but not an open area with human authorities present." "So we're trapped," Elena said. "If I don't go out, they escalate and draw attention. If I do go out, I'm vulnerable. Either way, the Covenant wins. Unless," Thomas said slowly, "we complete the ritual tonight instead of tomorrow. Move up the timeline, finish the bond before Michael can create more complications. Once Elena is fully bonded and transformed, she'll be strong enough to defend herself even in the open." Isabel frowned. "The ritual requires preparation, specific timing, the right phase of moon and magic. Doing it rushed risks complications." "The alternative is losing everything," Marcus pointed out. "If human authorities breach this estate, if media descends, if the Covenant forces a public confrontation, we're finished. Better to risk a rushed ritual than guaranteed failure." Lucien looked at Elena, the question clear in his eyes and through the bond. "It's your choice. Always your choice. We can wait, try to manage the situation politically, or we can act now. Complete the bond tonight and deal with whatever consequences come." Elena thought about Michael outside with his lawyers and his performative concern, trying to rescue her from a choice he couldn't understand. Thought about the Covenant manipulating him, using her ex-husband's jealousy as a weapon. Thought about the ritual waiting, the transformation that would either kill her or make her immortal. Waiting wouldn't make it safer, just gave their enemies more time to plan. "Let's do it," she said. "Tonight. Now. Whatever preparation we can manage in the next few hours, and then we finish this." "You're certain?" Lucian asked. "Once we begin, there's no turning back." "I'm certain," Elena said, feeling the truth of it through the bond. "I'm terrified, but I'm certain. Let's complete this before the Covenant can stop us." The library erupted into controlled chaos as Isabel began gathering supplies. Marcus coordinated security. Thomas prepared the route to the underground temple. Lucien stood close to Elena, their hands clasped, the bond already humming with anticipation of what came next. Outside the estate walls, Michael demanded answers he wouldn't understand even if they were given. Inside, Elena prepared to die and be reborn as something new. The transformation would hurt, Isabel had warned. 6 hours of agony as human cells died and vampire magic took their place. But Elena had survived divorce, survived rebuilding herself from nothing, survived learning the supernatural world existed alongside the mundane. She could survive this too. She had to. Because the alternative was losing Lucian, losing the possibility of partnership that didn't require her to be smaller, losing eternity before she'd even tasted it. The bond flared bright between them as if responding to her determination. Through it, she felt Lucien's love and fear and fierce protective instinct, felt his certainty that she was strong enough for this, even when she doubted herself. That faith mattered more than safety, more than the comfortable, predictable life she was leaving behind. They had 3 hours until the ritual could begin. 3 hours to prepare for the transformation that would change everything. Elena spent it memorizing Lucien's face in firelight, memorizing the feel of the bond before it became permanent, memorizing her last moments as fully human. Tomorrow she would wake as something else, or she wouldn't wake at all. Tonight she chose the risk. Chose the impossible. Chose love over safety and eternity over ease. The garden roses glowed brighter as midnight approached, responding to the magic gathering in the estate. Elena stood among them and felt ready, terrified, but ready. The bond would complete tonight, and whatever came after, they would face it together. Isabel worked through the night gathering what they needed for a ritual that should have taken days to prepare properly. Elena watched from the library doorway as the older woman moved with purpose through rooms that seemed to shift and expand beyond normal geometry, pulling items from places that shouldn't exist. A ceremonial blade older than Rome, its edge still sharp enough to draw blood with the lightest touch. Vials of liquid that glowed faintly in colors Elena had no names for. Candles made from beeswax and something else, something that smelled of old forests and older magic. Robes woven from fabric that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Thomas appeared beside Elena carrying 2 goblets that looked like they belonged in a museum. These have been used for every bonding ritual in Lucien's line for 6 centuries. They're inscribed with the old tongue, words that predate modern language. When you drink from them during the ritual, you'll be speaking vows that thousands of bonded pairs have spoken before you. The weight of that history pressed against Elena's chest. She wasn't just choosing Lucien, she was choosing to become part of something ancient and ongoing, a tradition that stretched back before countries had their current names. Thomas must have felt her anxiety through proximity to the bond, because he set the goblets down carefully and turned to face her. You're wondering if you're worthy of this, if you're special enough, or strong enough, or important enough to carry that kind of legacy. Elena nodded mutely. I'm just an architect from Seattle. 3 days ago, my biggest concern was permit approvals. Now I'm supposed to become part of vampire royalty, complete a ritual that matters to thousands of people I've never met. What if I'm not enough? Thomas smiled gently. Lucien was just a merchant's son dying of plague when he was turned. Marcus was a barely literate soldier. Isabel was a hedge witch the church would have burned if they'd caught her. None of us were special before we became what we are. The magic doesn't choose people who are already extraordinary. It chooses people with the capacity to become extraordinary. You've already proven you have that capacity by surviving this far. The transformation will just give you time to develop it fully. Before Elena could respond, Lucian entered carrying a small wooden box worn smooth by centuries of handling. Inside, on faded velvet, lay 2 rings, simple silver bands etched with symbols that seemed to move when Elena looked at them directly. These belonged to the first bonded pair, the progenitor and his consort. They're not required for the ritual, but I wanted you to have them. A reminder that what we're doing has been done before, successfully, by people who faced odds as impossible as ours. Elena took the smaller ring, feeling the warmth of it against her palm. The symbols resolved into words she somehow understood, despite never having seen the language before. Choose freely, love fiercely, endure together. The progenitor's consort was human when she bonded, Lucien said quietly. The ritual transformed her just as it will transform you. She lived for 800 years, ruled beside her mate, helped establish the laws that still govern our world. She was remarkable, but she was also just a woman who chose love over safety and paid the price and reaped the rewards. You're in good company. The ring fit perfectly on Elena's finger, warming further until it felt like part of her skin. Through the bond, she felt Lucien's hope and fear tangled together, felt the weight of 3 centuries of loneliness lifting, and the terror that something would go wrong at the last moment. She reached for his hand, and the contact steadied them both. "We should go over what actually happens during the ritual," Isabel said, her tone clinical and grounding. Elena appreciated the practical focus, the way it cut through sentiment to concrete details. "You and Lucien will kneel in the ritual circle facing each other. I'll invoke the ancient powers and open the way for the bond to complete. You'll each cut your palm with the ceremonial blade and press your hands together, mixing blood. While your blood mingles, you'll speak the vows in the old tongue. The language will come to you, the bond will provide it. After the vows, you'll drink from the goblets, his blood in yours, and your blood in his. That's when the transformation begins. Your human body will start to die. It's not metaphorical, Elena. Your heart will stop. Your breathing will cease. You'll be clinically dead for approximately 3 minutes while the vampire magic takes hold and rebuilds you. Those 3 minutes are when you're most vulnerable. If anything interrupts the ritual during that window, if your will falters or outside forces interfere, you'll simply die. No resurrection, no second chances. The magic completes or it kills you. Elena's throat felt tight. 3 minutes of being dead. And I'll be conscious during this. Yes, Isabel confirmed. You'll feel everything. The dying, the burning as the magic rewrites your cells, the moment when your heart restarts, and your first breath, as something other than human fills your lungs. Most people who undergo this transformation scream. Some beg for it to stop. The magic doesn't care. It runs its course regardless. You need to hold on through the worst of it. Trust that it will end. Trust that Lucien will anchor you. If you let go, if you give up during those 3 minutes, you're gone. Thomas added quietly, I was turned in combat, dying from a bullet wound. The transformation was agonizing, but I had the luxury of being unconscious for most of it. You won't have that mercy. You'll be fully aware as your humanity burns away. I won't lie to you, it's the worst pain I've ever experienced, and I've experienced a lot. But it's finite. That's what you have to remember. However bad it gets, it will end. Can you actually die from the pain? Elena asked. Can your mind just break under the weight of it? It's possible, Isabel admitted. Rare, but possible. That's why the bond chooses carefully. It needs 2 people strong enough to survive the completion. You wouldn't have made it this far if the magic didn't believe you could finish. Lucian's hand tightened on hers. I'll be with you every moment. Through the bond you'll feel my presence, my certainty that you'll survive. Use that as an anchor when the pain is worst. And if something goes wrong, Elena asked steadily, if my body rejects the transformation or the covenant interferes, or any of the dozen things that could derail this actually happen, what's the backup plan? Silence fell heavy in the library. Marcus spoke from the doorway where he'd been listening. There is no backup plan. If the ritual fails, you die and Lucien dies and the covenant assumes control of his territories. Everything we've built over 3 centuries crumbles. That's what makes this so dangerous. We're risking everything on one night, one ritual, one leap of faith that the bond chose correctly. The honesty was brutal, but Elena preferred it to comforting lies. She looked at each of them in turn, these people who'd become unexpectedly important to her in the span of days. Isabel with her clinical competence masking deep care, Thomas with his gentle encouragement and hard truths, Marcus with his tactical mind and unexpected kindness, and Lucien, watching her with 300 years of hope and fear written across his face. Okay, Elena said. Tell me everything else I need to know. Don't leave anything out because you think it will scare me. I want full information before we do this. They spent the next 2 hours going over every detail. The route to the temple through tunnels that predated the city above. The security protocols Marcus had arranged. Diversionary tactics to pull Covenant forces away from their actual path. The possibility of ambush and contingency plans if they encountered resistance. The layout of the temple itself, massive and ancient, carved into bedrock by vampire hands centuries before humans settled this coastline. Elena learned the old tongue phonetically, practiced the vows until they felt natural on her tongue, even though she didn't fully understand the words. Isabel explained that understanding would come during the ritual, that the magic would open pathways in her mind to comprehend the language of binding. She learned what would happen after the transformation completed, the immediate surge of power and sensation, the hunger that would follow, the need to feed within hours of awakening. Thomas volunteered to be her first donor, his blood freely given to anchor her new nature. The intimacy of that offer, the trust it represented, made Elena's eyes sting. As midnight approached, Marcus gathered them for final security briefing. We leave in convoy at sunset tomorrow. That gives us cover of darkness and time to navigate the tunnels before the Covenant expects us to move. I'll have teams creating disturbances across the city, false sightings, anything to split their attention. But we have to assume they'll find us eventually. The temple's location isn't secret, just difficult to access. Once we're inside, we'll have maybe an hour before they breach the outer defenses. The ritual needs to happen fast. Isabel nodded. I can compress the preparation if necessary. It's not ideal but functional. Once the vows are spoken and blood is mixed, the transformation is inevitable. The Covenant can't stop it at that point. They can only kill you both while it's happening. Lucian spoke with the authority of a king making strategic decisions. Then we proceed as planned. Marcus, coordinate with the Eastern teams. I want maximum chaos starting at sunset and continuing through the night. Thomas, you'll guard the approach tunnel. No one gets past you to interrupt the ritual. Isabel, you focus solely on Elena during the transformation. I'll handle any threats that breach our perimeter. We're clear on roles. His gaze swept the room, assessing his people, and Elena saw why they followed him. There was certainty in his bearing, confidence that came from centuries of making impossible plans work, but she also felt through the bond his underlying terror, the awareness that this gamble could cost him everything. She squeezed his hand and felt him settle slightly, drawing strength from her presence the way she drew strength from his. They spent the remaining hours before dawn in quiet preparation. Elena tried to sleep, but her mind spun with too many thoughts. She lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling while the bond hummed with Lucian's awareness of her wakefulness. He appeared in her doorway near dawn without knocking, clearly feeling her restlessness. Can't sleep either, he asked. Too much adrenaline, Elena admitted. Too many ways this could go wrong playing through my head. Come here. Lucian settled beside her on the bed, not touching but close enough that she felt steadied by his presence. Through the bond she could feel his emotional state, fear and hope, balanced in careful tension. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness gave way to gray dawn light. I keep thinking about Michael, Elena said eventually. How angry he'd be if he knew what I was choosing. He always said I was too cautious, too focused on safety over adventure. Now I'm literally choosing to die and be reborn as something immortal. He'd probably say I was having a breakdown, that this is some dramatic overreaction to our divorce. Do you think it is? Lucien asked carefully. Elena considered honestly. A week ago, maybe I would have thought so, but no, this is separate from Michael. This is about me finally admitting what I actually want instead of what I think I should want. I've spent my whole adult life building careful, stable, boring things. Safe job, safe marriage, safe life. And it all felt hollow because I was making myself smaller to fit into those safe spaces. You're offering me a chance to be bigger than I ever imagined, to build things that last centuries, to matter in ways I never thought possible. That's terrifying, but it's also exactly what I need. Lucien was quiet for a moment before speaking. I won't lie and say the life I'm offering is better than the human existence you'd have otherwise. It's more dangerous, more complicated, more demanding. You'll face things that would break most people. You'll make choices with no good options and live with the consequences forever. But you'll also have time to become whoever you want to be, to pursue whatever matters to you without the constraint of a human lifespan. And you'll have me for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything, Elena said, meaning it. That's why I'm doing this, not for immortality or power, but for partnership with someone who sees me completely and still believes I'm enough. They leaned together, and the bond flared warm between them, anticipation and determination mixing. Tomorrow night, everything would change. Tomorrow night, Elena would die and be reborn, or she would simply die and take Lucian with her. The stakes were absolute, the risk total, the choice irrevocable. As the sun rose fully and they finally slept, the bond wrapped around them both like armor and anchor combined. The temple emptied slowly after Constantine's forced acknowledgement, vampire lords departing in careful order of precedence as ancient protocol demanded. Elena watched them go with senses that still felt overwhelming in their intensity, hearing conversations 3 chambers away, seeing details in shadow that should have been invisible, feeling the complex web of power and alliance that connected everyone present. Some of the departing lords met her eyes with respect, bordering on wariness. Others looked through her as though she didn't exist. A calculated insult she felt Lucian register, through the bond with cold fury, he didn't express outwardly. Lord Dmitri of the Eastern Territories approached before leaving, ancient enough that even Constantine had deferred to him during the ritual. He studied Elena with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. You withstood Constantine's assault with remarkable strength for one so newly transformed. Your will is formidable. That will serve you well in the trials ahead, and make no mistake, trials will come. Those who fear your mate's power will test you constantly, seeking weakness to exploit. Thank you for the warning, Elena said, surprised her voice came out steady despite her racing thoughts. I'll remember it. See that you do, Dmitri replied. You carry more than your own fate now. You carry the stability of territories that house millions of humans and thousands of vampires. Your choices will echo across continents. Choose wisely. He departed with his retinue, leaving Elena feeling the weight of his words settle across her shoulders like a physical thing. Through the bond, she felt Lucian's pride in how she'd handled the interaction, his relief that at least some of the old powers seemed willing to accept her legitimacy. Not everyone was so diplomatic. Lady Vera of the Southern Court paused on her way out, her smile sharp as broken glass. How charming, a human playing at royalty. Do let me know when the novelty wears off, and you realize what you've actually bound yourself to. 3 centuries of blood and compromise and necessary evils, all of it yours to carry now. I give you a decade before the weight crushes you. Elena met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated despite the predatory energy radiating from the ancient vampire. I've carried the weight of rebuilding myself from nothing after my life fell apart. I think I can manage carrying a partnership with someone I actually love. The difference is I'm not carrying it alone this time. Vera's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes, calculation reassessing initial judgment. Perhaps you'll surprise us all. Or perhaps you'll become just another cautionary tale about humans who reach too high. Time will tell. She swept away, trailing expensive perfume and barely veiled threat. Marcus appeared at Elena's elbow the moment Vera was out of earshot. That went better than expected. She usually goes straight for the throat with new consorts. You handled her well. I have no idea what I'm doing, Elena admitted quietly. Half of what I'm saying is bluff and improvisation. Good, Marcus said with something almost like approval. That's exactly what vampire politics requires. Keep them guessing. Never show weakness. Trust your instincts. You're learning faster than most. The last of the vampire lords departed, and finally, it was just Lucien's inner court remaining in the temple. The eternal flames burned lower now, settling back to their normal intensity after the ritual's magical surge. Isabel was already packing her supplies with efficient movements, separating what needed to return to the estate from what should remain in the temple for future rituals. Thomas checked the perimeter wards, ensuring no one had left nasty surprises behind. Elena sagged against Lucienne, exhaustion hitting her like a wall now that the immediate crisis had passed. The transformation had drained her more than she'd realized, adrenaline keeping her upright through Constantine's challenge, but now leaving her shaky and overwhelmed. "You need to feed," Lucian said quietly. "Properly, not just the ritual blood. Your body is still adjusting, still burning energy to complete the transformation. If you don't feed soon, you'll collapse." The thought of drinking blood still felt surreal despite everything she'd experienced. Thomas had volunteered earlier, but the intimacy of actually feeding from someone she barely knew made her hesitate. Lucian felt her reluctance through the bond. "You can feed from me. It's not traditional for newly bonded pairs, but there's no rule against it. And it might be easier your first time with someone you're already connected to." They found a quiet alcove away from the others, and Elena tried not to think too hard about what she was doing as Lucian offered his wrist. The scent of his blood called to something newly awakened in her, hunger rising sharp and demanding. When she bit down, instinct took over, the taste flooding her senses with warmth and power and life. Through the bond, she felt Lucian's satisfaction, his pleasure at providing for her, the intimacy of sharing blood with his bonded mate. It was more intense than she'd expected, more right, settling something restless in her newly transformed body. When she pulled back, the wounds on his wrist closed immediately, vampire healing already visible. Elena felt steadier, stronger, the exhaustion pushed back by the influx of energy. Lucian smiled at her, tender in a way that made her chest tight. "Better. Much better," Elena admitted. "Is it always like that?" "The feeding." Lucian's expression turned considering. "With bonded mates, yes. It's different than feeding from donors or contracts. More complete. You'll understand more as you adjust." Marcus interrupted with tactical efficiency. "We should move." The Covenant accepted the bond's legitimacy, but that doesn't mean they won't try something once we're outside temple grounds. "The wards here protect us, but the journey back to the estate presents opportunities for ambush." They traveled in tight formation through tunnels that felt different to Elena's transformed senses. Ancient magic humming in the stone, traces of power left by centuries of vampire passage. She could feel Lucien's awareness of their surroundings, his constant assessment of threat levels, the way his court moved in coordinated patterns born of decades working together. This was what she'd chosen. Not just Lucienne, but this whole complex, dangerous world. The weight of Dimitri's warning echoed in her thoughts. Your choices will echo across continents. She was responsible now for more than her own life, more than her relationship with Lucienne. She carried the stability of territories, the safety of populations both human and vampire. The pressure of it should have been crushing, but instead it felt clarifying. She'd spent years designing buildings, thinking in terms of structure and foundation, and how spaces could serve communities. This was the same skill set applied to different architecture. She was building something that would last, creating stability in a world that desperately needed it. Through the bond, she felt Lucien's awareness of her thoughts, his quiet pride in how she was processing the enormity of what they'd accomplished. "We'll face this together," he reminded her. "Every challenge, every threat, every impossible decision. You're not alone in this." "I know," Elena thought back, marveling at the ease of communication through the bond. "That's why I'm not terrified. Well, not completely terrified anyway." His mental laughter warmed her as they emerged from the tunnels into the pre-dawn darkness. The estate waited across the city, sanctuary and fortress combined. Tomorrow she would begin learning what being a vampire consort actually meant beyond ritual and symbol. Tonight she was simply grateful to have survived, to have chosen correctly, to have found partnership that didn't require her to be anything other than exactly who she was. The bond hummed between them as Marcus drove them home through empty streets, and Elena felt the future stretching ahead full of danger and possibility in equal measure. Elena stood in the temple alone for the first time since the ritual 3 months ago, though Thomas waited at a discreet distance near the entrance because some security protocols were apparently eternal. The eternal flames cast dancing shadows across walls carved with names of bonded pairs, stretching back centuries, and she found her own name there now beside Lucien's, freshly inscribed in stone that would outlast countries. The transformation felt both immediate and distant, like something that happened yesterday and a lifetime ago simultaneously. She was still Elena Marsh, still designed buildings, still met Jenna for coffee, and visited her office downtown where her colleagues remained blessedly ignorant of her new nature. But she was also someone new, someone stronger and stranger, someone learning to navigate vampire politics with the same careful attention she'd once applied to building codes and zoning regulations. The community center project spread across her tablet screen, blueprints that blended human and vampire needs in ways no architect had attempted before. Daylight-protected gathering spaces with retractable UV shielding, meeting rooms designed for negotiations between species, medical facilities equipped for both human and vampire physiology. The Vampire Council had approved it unanimously last week, Dimitri himself calling it innovative and necessary. Lucien had watched her present the proposal with pride radiating through the bond so strongly she'd almost lost her train of thought. Combat training with Marcus happened every morning now, her newly transformed body learning speed and strength that defied human limitation. She could hold her own for almost 30 seconds before he inevitably pinned her, which he assured her was remarkable progress for 3 months. The bruises healed within minutes. Vampire regeneration already second nature. Isabel taught her magic in the evenings, small spells and protection wards, ways to sense hostile intent and shield her mind from psychic intrusion. Nothing flashy yet, but functional, building a foundation for greater power as she grew into her abilities. The Elder Council sessions were somehow more complex than human politics, despite having fewer participants, centuries of grudges and alliances, creating layers of subtext she was still learning to navigate. She could feel Lucien's awareness of her even across the city, the bond a constant thread connecting them regardless of distance. His presence in her mind was comforting rather than intrusive, a reminder she was never truly alone, even when physically separated. The intimacy of it still surprised her sometimes, the way they could communicate without words, share emotions and thoughts with barely any effort. She'd worried the bond would feel like losing herself, but instead it felt like being more fully herself than ever before, seen completely and accepted without reservation. Footsteps echoed through the temple, and she knew without turning that Lucien had arrived, drawn by her contemplative mood through their connection. He crossed the space between them with the fluid grace she'd grown accustomed to, settling beside her on the stone bench where she sat surrounded by history. "You're thinking loudly," he observed with gentle amusement. "I can feel your mind spinning from the estate." Elena leaned into his shoulder, solid and reassuring, just processing how much has changed. 3 months ago, I was a divorced architect whose biggest concern was permit approvals. Now I'm learning combat magic and designing interspecies community centers and attending vampire political councils. It's surreal. "Regrets?" Lucien asked quietly, though she could feel through the bond that he already knew the answer. "None," Elena confirmed. "It's overwhelming and complicated and sometimes terrifying, but I wouldn't change it. This feels right in a way nothing else ever has." His relief washed through the bond even though he'd known her answer. Some fears run too deep for logic to dismiss entirely. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Lucien's expression shifted, concern threading through the bond. "There's something you need to know." Intelligence reports from our contacts in Eastern Europe suggest a vampire faction is developing a weapon designed to artificially break mate bonds. Elena felt ice settle in her stomach. Is that possible? The bond is supposed to be unbreakable. It should be impossible, Lucien agreed. The magic is ancient and absolute. But there are always those who seek to unmake what they can't control. If they've actually succeeded, if they have a weapon that can shatter bonds, it would destabilize everything. The bond is the foundation of vampire royal power, the source of stability in our governments. Without it, chaos. War between factions, territories collapsing, the fragile peace we've maintained for centuries dissolving. And we'd be the primary target, Elena said, understanding the implications immediately. Proving it works by breaking the bond between the vampire king and his newly transformed consort. Maximum political impact. Lucian nodded grimly. Constantine would back any effort to destabilize my rule. But there's another consideration. Other vampire kings are reaching out, interested in alliances. They're curious about you, about a human-born consort who survived the trial of wills and emerged stronger than expected. Some see opportunity for genuine cooperation between our courts, for ending the territorial conflicts that have defined vampire politics for centuries. Your unique position, bridging human and vampire worlds, makes things possible that weren't before. So threat and opportunity simultaneously, Elena said. A weapon that could destroy us and a chance to build something better than what came before. Exactly, Lucien confirmed. We need to investigate the weapon reports, determine if the threat is real, and how to counter it. But we also need to engage with the other courts, build alliances while they're willing to consider it. You'll be central to both efforts. Your perspective, your ability to navigate between worlds, that's invaluable. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settle across her shoulders, familiar now after 3 months of carrying it. What do we do first? Together, Lucian said, and she felt his love through the bond like sunlight breaking through clouds. We face it together, like everything else. We investigate the weapon, we build the alliances, we protect what we've created, and we trust that the bond that brought us together is strong enough to withstand whatever comes. Elena stood, decision crystallizing. Then let's get started. I have a community center to finish designing, and apparently a vampire weapon conspiracy to help unravel, multitasking at its finest. Lucian's laugh was warm and genuine. This is why the bond chose you. Anyone else would be overwhelmed. You're already planning how to fit it into your schedule. They left the temple together, Thomas falling into step behind them as they emerged into afternoon sunlight that no longer burned Elena's transformed skin, just felt warm and pleasant. The car waited outside, Marcus at the wheel, ready to take them wherever the next crisis demanded. But first Elena had asked for one stop, a moment of normalcy before diving back into vampire politics and supernatural threats. Rosewood Café looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago when Elena had walked in, expecting a forgettable blind date, and found instead the beginning of everything. She sat at the same table, ordered the same coffee she didn't technically need anymore but drank anyway because the ritual of it grounded her. Jenna arrived precisely on time, sliding into the seat across from her with the familiar mix of affection and exasperation that characterized their relationship. You look different every time I see you, Jenna observed. Not older, obviously, but more confident, more present, more like you're actually living instead of just going through motions. Elena smiled. I'm happy, Jen, really happy. More complicated than I ever imagined my life would be, but genuinely happy. Jenna studied her carefully. The vampire thing still terrifies me. The danger, the politics, watching you face threats I can't help with. But I also can't deny you're more yourself now than you were in all the years with Michael. So I'm trying to accept it, even when I'm terrified. Thank you, Elena said quietly, for trying, for not giving up on me when this all seemed insane. You're my sister, Jenna said simply. I don't give up on you, even when you make choices that give me heart attacks. They talked about normal things for a while, Jenna's work and mutual friends, and the cat Mr. Darcy who was adjusting to Elena's irregular schedule with feline disdain. The conversation was ordinary and precious, a reminder that Elena still had roots in the human world, even as she grew into her vampire nature. Through the window, Elena could see Lucien waiting in the car, giving her this space with her sister, this moment of uncomplicated humanity. The bond hummed between them, comfortable and constant. Across the street, a black sedan pulled up, Covenant insignia barely visible on the door. The driver watched the café with cold calculation, making no move to approach, but clearly sending a message. They were still watching, still waiting for weakness, still searching for opportunities to strike. The war Constantine had promised wasn't over, just paused. New threats were always emerging. Elena registered the threat, filed it away to discuss with Marcus later, and turned her attention back to Jenna. She'd chosen this life with full knowledge of the cost, the danger, the endless complications. She'd defend it, protect it, fight for it with everything she had. But she'd also live it, fully and without apology. Are you happy? Jenna asked again, quieter this time. Really, truly happy. Elena considered the question with complete honesty. Her life was more dangerous than she'd ever imagined, more complicated, more impossible by conventional standards. She'd never have a normal marriage or normal career or normal anything. She'd watch her sister age while she stayed eternally young. She'd face enemies who wanted her dead for existing. She'd navigate vampire politics for centuries. She'd carry responsibilities that affected millions of lives across continents. But she also had partnership with someone who saw her completely and loved her anyway. She had power to protect what mattered. She had purpose larger than herself. She had eternity to become whoever she wanted to be, to build things that would last, to matter in ways she'd never dreamed possible. Yeah, Elena said, feeling the absolute truth of it settle in her chest. I really am. She finished her coffee and stood, kissed Jenna's cheek, promised to call soon. The bond pulled her toward Lucien, toward the car, toward whatever new crisis waited. The cafe door chimed as she left, familiar and grounding. On the table behind her, the coffee cup sat next to a single red rose that glowed faintly in the afternoon light, a gift Lucien had left there before she arrived, a reminder of where they'd begun. Elena took his hand as she reached the car, feeling his love and certainty through the bond. Together they drove into an uncertain future, but it was a future they'd chosen, a future they'd face side by side, a future that stretched ahead full of danger and possibility and promise. The Covenant sedan followed at a distance, patient and predatory. Let them watch, Elena thought. Let them plan and scheme and wait for weakness. She and Lucien would be ready. They'd face it together, like they faced everything, and they'd build something worth fighting for in the process. The bond blazed bright between them as the city passed by outside the windows, and Elena smiled, fierce and certain, ready for whatever came next.